It feels like we're in a golden age of anime. There are so many good shows, and with that abundance comes a lot of great stories falling between the cracks. Today I want to talk about shows that stood out to me as worthwhile to watch, ones you may or may not have already seen, from hyper popular within the last 10 years to more obscure. You've likely heard of most, if not all of them. None of these shows are deep cuts. But something that's becoming more apparent as people leave comments is how many people are getting into anime because of Frieren and some of my videos. So I wanted to take this week to give some suggestions. My name is Pei, and today we're talking about 7 fantastic shows I think you should watch. Starting first with Skip and Loafer. On paper, this is a show that's been done many times before, and if I hadn't watched it, I wouldn't think it stands out as much as it does. In my last couple of videos, I've talked a lot about how there are certain rules you want to follow with protagonists. You can subvert them, but eventually you want a lead character that audiences can relate to, that they're rooting for, that they find charming, because they are ultimately the catalyst in which the story is told, and a major lens that will shift the way the audience feels. That is incredibly true of Skip and Loafer, with a lead protagonist, Mitsumi, that is so freaking charming. But it doesn't stop there. The side characters and stories seem to consistently outpunch their weight class. This high school romance model with an ensemble cast built around a generally wholesome story and interpersonal drama and conflict, it's been done a lot. But the way Skip and Loafer engages with this premise offers so much more depth than I'm used to from these types of stories. It's not a show that prioritizes humor, but it's still incredibly funny in a kind of wholesome way that makes you feel fuzzy by the end. You know how some people talk about how they associate feelings with colors? Well, this show falls somewhere in that spectrum between red, orange, and yellow. It's warm and comforting with these little moments, like one of my all-time favorite scenes using silence and space, or these little animated details that come at the perfect time. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Characters consistently push themselves outside of their comfort zone, take on new challenges, or face personal struggles. This story feels incredibly nostalgic to me. Anime and media in general very often tries to expand its target audience. They cast 20 and 30-year-old adults to play teenagers, or write middle schoolers that live in a dorm. A show that I think is outstanding that really engages this is later on the list, Mob Psycho. It draws middle schoolers with muscles the size of bodybuilders. It's not always a bad thing, but it is really nice when a show comes along and writes characters that feel their age. It's also nice to see a story that focuses on teenage angst through a little bit more of a wholesome lens, and it does this without feeling out of touch or preachy. This show really feels like it captures the innocence of early high school youth, the nerve-wracking stress of making new friends at a new school, navigating who you were in the past and who you want to be in the future. You know how sometimes in the Olympics the maximum score for a routine is determined by the difficulty of what they're setting out to do? Skip and Loafer seems like it should be limited by its ambition. It's telling a story that's been told hundreds of times before. Yet somehow it demonstrates very beautifully just how much left there is to explore. How much more you can get from a simple story. Now, on the topic of a character really feeling their age comes a shonen built around a midlife crisis. Kaiju No. 8's second season is currently airing, and before watching it, I decided to rewatch the first season, and I was shocked by how strong of a show it was, especially in a second viewing. This and 2 other shows on the list are what I would consider to be hyper popular. These are very far from anything that you could consider a deep cut. Kaiju No. 8 is very upfront with the way it's subverting shonen tropes. This is a genre that's target audience is young boys, leading to protagonists that are almost always within the age range of 13 to 21, with a bell curve that leans way towards the lower end. But Kaiju No. 8 asks the very fun question of what if a shonen protagonist was actually a 32-year-old man, one almost ready to give up on his dream of joining his childhood friend in a task force that's built around fighting these ginormous kaiju. Oh yeah, and she's remarkably badass. Why does she have a giant white tiger by her side? Because it'd be cool. This show, outside of its protagonist being older, doesn't really come along and do anything groundbreaking or subversive, but I do think it understands the assignment really well while feeling fresh. Some anime are defined by their peaks, and Kaiju No. 8 nails that. From its sound design, music, pacing, animation, it works really well in conjunction to lead to these fantastic big moments that are delivered handfuls at a time. The characters are mostly pretty solid, with a fun protagonist, because ultimately where this show really shines is in embracing its nature as something that's just fun to watch. And that's why I'm suggesting people watch it, because as I've come back to revisit it, I'm surprised at how solid it is. Ultimately, it sets out to do something very specific, and then does it really well. What about a show that's much more obscure? One that differentiates itself strongly from Kaiju No. 8 and Skip and Loafer in telling a story that feels a lot more singular. Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken follows 3 high school girls as they venture into the world of creating their own anime. Something that's kind of cool about these meta stories of an anime about making anime is that they come with a deep understanding of what it's actually like. As someone that's worked a lot behind the scenes with multiple content creators, made music professionally, and released my own YouTube videos, a lot of the behind the scenes of making art is very unglamorous, but still something worth romanticizing in its mundane way. So as watching this, it felt very real to my experience in other mediums, while also being very informative. It felt like it gave me a peek behind the curtain of something I haven't had a chance to really do. What makes this story in particular great is the style, execution, and characters. Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken does this thing that I'm gonna call immersive imagination, kind of like that movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, where when characters are brainstorming ideas, we're seeing them come to life in front of us, fully animated. Mix in when they actually release products and the immersion starts to bleed through the screen, it's really cool. It's also very educational, teaching about the animation process. The immersion and topic are great, but I think the characters are just as good. Female anime characters so often are beautiful and then fall into one of many anime female character tropes. They're aggressive or cold, maybe they're popular, but very rarely does it feel like female characters get to be characters first without having to tick a lot of boxes. But with any norm or standard comes the opportunity to break it, and Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken does that really well with a very charming trio, and each one of them is weird as hell in their own right. All of this contributes to a show that feels incredibly singular, a little quirky masterpiece that I think not enough people have had the opportunity to see. Give it a shot, and before you know it, it might sneak up on you and just blow you away. On the topic of an anime that really understands what it's written around, comes a sports anime that's been praised by professionals and Olympians. One of Japan's current best volleyball players pointed at Haikyuu in his GQ interview. Sports anime so often doesn't understand the sport it's adapting, leading to situations where the more familiar you are with the sport, the less likely you are to like the show. I hate Kuroko no Basket, and it's not because I think it's a bad show. It's because I play a lot of basketball, and everything from the animation to the writing decisions to the very premise of what's possible is so ungrounded. It ruined my ability to get immersed in what many other people would consider to be a great show. However, Haikyuu does not have that issue. The animation, the writing, the understanding of the sport, it's even less exaggerated than I originally thought it was. Videos like this one from Eric Shoji, who's the libero for the US men's Olympic team. Or this video from a channel called the McKibben Brothers, where they break down an old match between Hawaii's actual state champions and a team from Japan that came over for an exhibition match. My initial impression of Haikyuu was that it was incredibly accurate, but the more I learned about it, the more true that seemed to be. But the reason I like Haikyuu isn't just because it gets the sport right. This is probably my most rewatched anime of all time. I've rewatched seasons of this show time and time again. Now don't get me wrong, I do think it's a little corny at first, but there was this moment after I started to really buy in where it really solidified itself as one of my favorite pieces of media I've ever consumed. I love this show, I love the characters, I love the writing. It was one of the first series to get me to pick up the manga when I finally caught up because I needed to know how it ended. It's a show that's optimistic, touching on the beauty of team sports. A show that as a lifelong competitor really understands one component of it, which leads us to the other side of competition and the next show on the list. I don't necessarily believe that there is one singular best piece of media, but if I had to choose one to make a case for, it would be Ping Pong the animation. This 11-episode masterpiece is a show that I think many people might not give a shot, and I understand why, because oh my god is its art style divisive. In some ways, Ping Pong looks like it could have been produced in MS Paint. In other ways, it's some of the most beautiful, expressive animation I've ever seen. This show is weird. It breaks a lot of conventions. It goes all over the place. But it is a beautiful, heartbreaking story with an underlying tone of optimism. But it takes a while to get there. Individual sports that are highly competitive can be completely soul-crushing. There's no excuses, no teammates, and very little politics that you can blame when you get beat by someone that's just better than you. People dedicate their entire lives, every waking moment, to being as good at table tennis as they possibly can be. And then they go to tournaments and get destroyed by someone substantially better than them. As much as its animation is initially off-putting, by the end, it is one of many incredibly strong components of the show. This is the type of story where someone might be completely confused 75% of the way through it. But when you finish, it sits with you. It made decisions constantly that subverted my expectations and took the story in a completely different direction than what I had expected. It used my own preconceived notions against me in a really fun way. And in some ways, it's a story that parallels all of the meaning that I found in Haikyuu, like yin and yang, different ways to approach stories built off of the same fundamentals. It's actually a topic I want to make an entire video exploring, but before we get there, I need Haikyuu to finish. While Haikyuu is one of my favorite pieces of media, a show that I'll die on the hill defending, Ping Pong the animation is one of the best. Which leads to my next choice, a show many people consider to be a masterpiece. Mob Psycho is another show that I think some people may have skipped out on because of their first impression, whether or not it's the art style or the vibe of the first couple episodes. But it's the story I wanted from something like One Punch Man, an overpowered protagonist done right. A story filled with tons of conflict that can't just be solved with power. But don't let that fool you, because there are tons of fantastic fight scenes built around remarkable aesthetics in the show. The animation seems rough around the edges, like they were cutting a lot of corners, but then you also get some of the most beautifully animated scenes I've seen in television. The humor at times feels very classically shonen, where loud equals funny and expressions are as exaggerated as possible. But part of the reason that works so well is because the main character Mob is drawn to be as undescript as possible. He's written to be apathetic and monotone. His character at first seems boring, but then his personality ties into a much deeper and bigger arc, one that touches on meaningful aspects of the human condition. I have a video coming up comparing a character from Mob Psycho to Frieren, and in the same way I've spent so much time breaking down how Frieren is a story that explores much bigger themes, I think Mob Psycho is one that does it too. It never stops trying to be funny, and maybe the jokes grew on me or they were written better, but I found myself laughing more and more as I watched the show. Mix that with its serious moments and you get something actually really special. I was talking to my roommate a while back about a video where I wanted to differentiate between pieces of media that were your favorite and ones that you could make a case for as being the best. I don't think there is a show that is the best, but I think there are shows that are so good that you could make a case for them. When prompted on the spot, he chose Mob Psycho, and I went, yeah. So whether or not you've given it a shot and given up, or were initially off-put, this is an anime that I would really suggest people try to push through, at least to the end of the first season. If it's still not for you, then okay. But maybe there's a chance you'll experience it the same way I did. A story that seems exaggerated and simple, but ends up being so much more. Mob Psycho and the next show I'm going to talk about are ones that really have lingered with me, with ideas expressed through a story I find myself consistently coming back to and thinking about. Sound Euphonium is the last show I'm going to be talking about today. It's a show I've had a lot of complicated emotions around. It chose to do one thing, especially as the story progressed, when I thought it was going to do something else. And what it did was really good, but in a kind of unsatisfying way, at least at first. I think the show in later seasons could have done a better job engaging with the ensemble cast it had set up. But just because the story didn't choose a path I expected doesn't mean it didn't choose a great one. I find myself coming back and thinking about the series a lot. I watched it really fast and was sure I was going to make videos about it, and then ended up not. I think a lot of storytelling is about making audiences feel satisfied. But Sound Euphonium doesn't pull punches in a way that made it feel so much more real to me. There are certain topics I find really boring. I've talked about this a lot, how I have kind of this natural disposition against high fantasy. But in the same way Frieren sold me on something I didn't think I'd be interested in, so did Sound Euphonium. I'm a musician who did concert band for 4 to 5 years and realized it wasn't for me and I didn't really like it. And so it took a lot of convincing for me to finally kind of give Sound Euphonium a shot. And I really wasn't sold for a while. I mean, I almost feel like I want to talk about all the things I struggled with in this series. Like a wasted romantic opportunity between two characters that had remarkable chemistry, or how certain character arcs never really seemed to go anywhere. But ultimately, I think this is not only one of the better anime I've watched, but also one that really meant a lot to me. And I think the fact that I have such mixed feelings about it, but still think so highly of it, is a testament to something. While shows like Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken and Ping Pong the Animation feel objectively and distinctly singular, I feel so strongly about the way Sound Euphonium did that for me in a more subjective way. It just sits with me. And who knows, maybe it'll sit with you too. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you checked out any of these shows. I'm interested. I'll see you all next week.